Ladies and gentlemen, pay attention closely because what you are about to hear may explain the silence that has been sitting heavy on your heart. It may explain the distance that feels louder than words ever spoken. It may even explain why someone's actions keep replaying in your mind long after their voice has faded. There are moments in life when people reveal the truth without saying it directly, when what they do becomes more honest than anything they speak, when feelings are not explained but shown through behavior, through patterns, through absence and return. The heart speaks in ways the mind struggles to decode. Sometimes a person is trying to express something real, but they cannot say it out loud. So the message comes out sideways, through hesitation, through mixed signals, through warmth followed by cold distance, through silence that feels meaningful, not empty, through confusion that keeps repeating itself. Stay with this, because it gets deeper than it first looks. People do not always reveal their truth through clear words. Sometimes they reveal it through what they avoid. Sometimes through what they cannot release. Sometimes through the patterns they fall back into again and again. If you have been wondering why someone pulls away and then comes back, why they seem close one moment and distant the next, why they disappear and then reappear without explanation, then you are already sitting inside the answer. It may not be in a message, it may not be in an apology, it may be hidden inside the contradiction itself. What you are seeing is not full detachment, it is not full peace either. Something inside them is still active, still unsettled, still unresolved. A feeling has been triggered, a memory has been touched, and when people cannot face what they feel directly, it does not vanish. It changes shape. It shows up in thoughts that repeat, in curiosity that returns, in the urge to check on someone they said they were done with, in the pull to step away, yet never fully leave. And here is something important to hold on to. Keep listening carefully, because this part changes everything. At a deeper level, the human mind can hide a lot with logic and words, but emotions rarely stay hidden for long. Someone may say they are fine, yet their actions suggest tension underneath. Someone may claim they have moved on, yet they keep circling back in thought. Someone may insist they feel nothing, yet their behavior keeps revealing small cracks in that story. What is denied does not always disappear. In many cases, it grows quieter on the surface but louder underneath. Think about it. Why would someone try so hard to prove they do not care if there was truly nothing there? Why so many explanations for absence if the connection meant nothing at all? Often, people protect themselves most strongly from the feelings that affect them the most. When something touches a deep emotional place, fear shows up. When a person awakens old pain, fear shows up. When someone becomes meaningful enough to matter, fear shows up. And when fear enters, people retreat. They become distant. They create space. They build confusion instead of clarity. They test the bond instead of trusting it. Not always because they want to leave, but because closeness feels overwhelming. Yet distance does not erase emotion. Silence does not erase emotion. Avoidance only delays what is already alive inside. That is why the message behind all of this is often much simpler than it appears. Underneath the confusion, underneath the mixed behavior, there is often a truth that is hard to admit. And here is where it becomes very real. Do not skip this part. The truth that often sits underneath all of this is not always spoken, but it is felt. It is the feeling that someone matters more than they are ready to accept, more than they are ready to show, more than they are ready to risk. And for many people, that realization is uncomfortable. It shakes pride. It stirs old wounds. It creates uncertainty. So instead of facing it directly, they step back. They act distant. They create silence. They try to regain control over emotions that feel too strong to hold. But emotions do not disappear just because they are resisted. They do not end because they are ignored. They wait. They return in thoughts, in curiosity, in quiet moments when everything else is still. If someone keeps coming back into your awareness, if their absence still feels loud, if their behavior feels inconsistent but emotionally charged, it is because something is not fully resolved. And maybe the clearest message hidden in all of this is simple. You matter more than they are ready to admit. Not always in a perfect way, not always in a clear way, but in a way that keeps pulling at their attention even in silence. And once you understand that, you stop chasing confusion for answers that were never meant to be found in words alone. It becomes difficult for a fearful heart. One part of them longs for closeness, while another part is focused only on protection. One part remembers how safe and warm it felt with you, while another part remembers the danger of being emotionally exposed. One part wants to reach out and reconnect, but another part pushes them to run away. When these opposite forces collide inside the same person, confusion is created. The mind splits into conflict. One voice says speak, another says stay silent. One voice says trust the connection, another says protect yourself at all costs. One voice pushes them forward while another pulls them back into hiding. Living in that kind of internal battle is draining. And when someone is living in that state, their behavior naturally becomes hard to understand from the outside. But confusion does not always mean lack of feeling. Sometimes confusion is actually emotional overload. Sometimes the person who confuses you the most is the one who is feeling the deepest but understanding it the least. Stay with this, because this is where most people get it wrong. People who struggle with their emotions often express themselves through inconsistency. They come close and then suddenly step back. They show interest and then disappear without explanation. They start a conversation with warmth and then go cold. They ask questions but avoid deeper emotional honesty. They give small signs of connection and then retreat before things become too real. This is not always cruelty, it is not always indifference. Sometimes it is fear wearing a different face. Sometimes it is pain acting like distance. Sometimes it is a heart that has not learned how to stay open without feeling exposed. What a person avoids inside themselves does not simply go away. It stays. It builds pressure. It influences decisions. It repeats patterns until it is finally understood. That is why some people keep circling back to the same emotional situations. They return to the same thoughts, the same memories, the same connection that refuses to fade. They are not only returning to a person, they are returning to something unfinished inside themselves. Keep listening carefully, because this part changes how you see everything. The hidden message underneath all of this is often very simple, even if the behavior looks complicated. It may feel like, I am experiencing something I cannot fully carry. That is often the real truth beneath the surface. Not that they feel nothing, not that they have moved on completely, not that they do not care anymore. The real struggle is that they feel too much in a way they cannot manage, and that becomes overwhelming. This is why strong emotions often disguise themselves. Distance can actually be self-protection. Pride can actually be fear in disguise. Silence can actually be inner conflict. Indifference can sometimes be attachment that feels too risky to show. What looks cold on the outside may actually be a storm on the inside. And here is something most people miss completely. Do not skip this part, because it explains the pattern. Some people are not distant because they lack feeling. They are distant because their feelings are too strong to handle openly. When a meaningful connection acts like a mirror, not everyone is ready to face what it reflects. Many people think they are reacting to another person, but in reality they are reacting to what that person awakens inside them. You may have triggered memories they never processed. You may have awakened emotions they tried to bury. You may have reflected their fears, their longing, their vulnerability back to them. And when that reflection becomes too intense, they step away. Not because it is gone, but because it feels too powerful to stay close to. So when someone pulls back, it does not automatically mean you were forgotten. When someone becomes silent, it does not automatically mean they feel nothing. Sometimes the emotional connection is exactly why they retreat. Because the stronger it feels, the more overwhelming it becomes for someone who is not ready to hold it. Some people leave because the story has naturally ended. Others leave because something inside them is still unfinished. And unfinished emotions often create unfinished connections. That is where mixed signals come from. A person sends closeness and distance at the same time. They make you feel valued, then suddenly unreachable. They make you feel seen, then ignored. They make you question yourself when the real struggle is happening inside their own emotional world. One of the hardest truths to accept is that they may not fully realize how deeply they affected you, but they are also being changed by the experience themselves. Their behavior keeps exposing it. Their patterns keep repeating it. Their return after silence keeps revealing it. The message underneath all of this stays the same. They want closeness, but closeness feels unsafe. They want certainty, but certainty demands truth. They want connection, but connection requires openness. They want understanding, but understanding requires awareness they are not fully ready for. So they remain stuck in between desire and defense, between emotion and fear, between what they want and what they think they can handle. And if you are watching closely, this is where it becomes important. In that in-between space, you become something they cannot easily erase from their mind. You become the question they cannot fully answer. You become the memory that does not fade cleanly. You become the feeling that does not settle into silence. And this is why your absence can affect them even more than your presence ever did. Presence brings routine, distraction, and comfort. But distance removes all of that. Distance creates space for reflection. It strips away noise. It forces emotions to surface that were previously buried under daily interaction. And once that silence sets in, thoughts start returning on their own. Memories come back without permission. Regret shows up in quiet moments. Possibilities they never explored begin replaying in their mind. The heart starts asking questions the mind tried to avoid. A conversation replays. A moment reappears. A feeling they thought they had control over suddenly returns with clarity. And slowly, the certainty they once showed begins to weaken, because deep down they were never as unaffected as they acted. Stay with this, because this is where the shift happens. The deeper part of the mind does not speak loudly. It does not announce itself in obvious ways. It works quietly through repetition, through thoughts that keep returning, through memories that do not fully fade, through dreams that feel too real to ignore, through sudden waves of longing that appear without warning. Even a familiar name can trigger something that feels unresolved, and what is unresolved never stays silent forever. It keeps asking for attention in one form or another. In many cases, the real issue is not the lack of love. It is the fear of what love demands, because real connection is not passive. It asks for honesty, it asks for growth, it asks for responsibility, it asks for emotional courage, it asks people to take off the roles they hide behind and show who they truly are underneath. And for someone who is not ready for that level of openness, even strong feelings can become overwhelming. Not because they are absent, but because they are too real to handle easily. For some people, that feeling becomes more frightening than actually losing the relationship itself. And that is where the cycle begins. They come closer, then step away. They reach out, then suddenly pull back. They move forward, then create distance again. It keeps repeating, like a loop they cannot fully exit. And all the while, they are trying to express something they do not yet have the words for. If you listen closely, the hidden truth is often very simple. I am not fully in control of what I feel, and that scares me. Many people misunderstand love because they expect it to always look clear, confident, and steady. But real emotion does not always behave that way. Sometimes love looks like hesitation. Sometimes it looks like avoidance. Sometimes it looks like confusion that never fully settles. Sometimes it looks like someone returning again and again without knowing why. Sometimes love lives inside a person who is still learning how to carry it without feeling overwhelmed. And when that happens, the connection does not disappear easily. It lingers, it pulls, it returns in unexpected ways. Keep watching, because this is where most misunderstandings begin. That is why silence should not always be read as emptiness. Distance should not always be read as absence. Fear should not always be mistaken for indifference. And just because someone struggles to express what they feel does not mean they feel nothing at all. In many cases, the strongest emotions are the ones most carefully hidden. The clearest message is not always spoken out loud. Sometimes it is shown through repeated behavior, through patterns that keep showing up no matter how much time passes. Do not confuse pride with peace. A person can appear calm on the outside while feeling completely unsettled inside. They can look distant while still carrying strong emotional weight. They can seem cold or unaffected while silently dealing with feelings they do not fully understand themselves. And here is a deeper possibility. Maybe they are not trying to show you that they do not care. Maybe what they are actually struggling with is the fact that they care more than they expected. Stay with this, because it changes how everything is seen. It is possible that something in you touched a part of them they were not prepared to face. Something they had kept buried, avoided, or locked away for a long time. A part of them they never expected anyone to reach. Your presence may have made it impossible for them to continue pretending they were unaffected or fully detached. Some people build their identity around control. They believe that if they stay guarded, they stay safe. If they stay distant, they stay strong. If they keep emotional space, they avoid pain. But life does not always respect those defenses. One connection enters, one moment shifts everything, and suddenly the walls they relied on begin to weaken. They start feeling more than they expected. They remember things they thought were gone. They begin wanting things they never allowed themselves to want. And they also begin fearing emotions they believed they had already outgrown. When that internal structure starts shaking, inconsistency often appears on the outside. It may look like mixed signals or emotional confusion, but sometimes it is deeper than that. It is not always manipulation. Sometimes it is not a game at all. Sometimes it is a person trying to hold themselves together while dealing with emotions that feel too big to manage. Sometimes they do not know how to be honest without feeling exposed. Sometimes they do not know how to be close without feeling unsafe. Sometimes they do not know how to love without reopening old emotional wounds. And beneath all of this, there is a quiet truth waiting to be understood. If a feeling is strong enough to disturb someone's peace, then it is strong enough to leave an impact that does not easily fade, to demand their attention. And if your presence has become something they simply cannot ignore, then what exists between you is not ordinary at all. It is not a small emotional moment. It is something that has entered their inner world and started reshaping it quietly from within. The human mind naturally looks for wholeness. It searches for meaning. It searches for clarity. It searches for a way to bring together the parts of the self that feel scattered or incomplete. And often, relationships become the space where this inner process begins to unfold. A person does not enter our life only as a companion. They also arrive as a trigger for reflection. They awaken desire. They awaken fear. They awaken hope. They awaken pain that was never fully processed. They bring forward emotions that were buried for years. They reveal what is healed and what is still unfinished inside us. They do not just touch the surface of the heart. They touch the deeper, unresolved parts of identity itself. Keep listening carefully because this is where the meaning becomes clearer. That is why your person may struggle to explain what is happening inside them. This connection may have forced them to face an internal conflict they can no longer avoid. One side of them wants closeness, while another side wants safety and distance. One part seeks honesty, while another part seeks control. The heart moves forward, but fear pulls it back. The past asks them to be cautious, while something deeper pushes them toward truth. When these forces collide, even a strong person can become quiet inside. And in that silence, many hope time will fix what courage has not yet addressed. But time does not heal what is hidden. It reveals it. It exposes it. It slowly brings it into awareness. If you have waited long enough, you may already be noticing signs of this unfolding. A glance that lingers too long, a message that comes later than expected, an apology that feels incomplete, a conversation that avoids direct clarity, a space they leave open even while acting distant, a pattern they repeat without fully understanding why. These are not random moments, they are emotional traces. Stay with this because it leads somewhere important. So, what are they really trying to communicate through all of this? Perhaps the simplest truth is that the connection still exists within them. Perhaps the story does not feel fully complete in their mind. Perhaps your presence created an impact deeper than they expected. Perhaps part of them is still remembering, still reacting, still feeling, even if they do not show it clearly. And maybe the most difficult truth is this: they are not fully ready to act, but they are also not completely free from what they feel. So what should you do with this understanding? You stop chasing confusion. You stop asking for clarity from someone who is still unsure within themselves. You stop reducing your own value to match someone else's hesitation. You stop mistaking emotional instability for real commitment. Instead, you begin to see things as they are. Some people feel deeply but do not know how to express it. Their inner conflict is not your reflection. Their confusion is not your fault. Their silence is not a measure of your worth. Stay with this because it brings perspective. Not everyone who feels something knows what to do with it. Not everyone who returns is ready to stay. Not everyone who misses you has the courage to show it clearly. Not everyone who thinks about you is able to act with honesty. That is why you must learn to read beyond words. You observe patterns. You observe repetition. You observe behavior when explanations are gone. You observe what remains when emotions are unspoken. Even your own reaction tells you something important. Sometimes your peace understands what your hope is still trying to ignore. Sometimes your intuition recognizes instability long before your emotions are willing to accept it. And sometimes the most caring decision is not to force answers, but to see what is already being shown. Because truth does not always arrive in clear sentences. Sometimes it arrives in silence. Sometimes it arrives in distance. Sometimes it arrives in return. And when you finally understand that, you stop waiting for words to confirm what actions have already made clear. It is present in the way they keep returning to your thoughts. It is also present in the way you keep finding your way back into theirs. And maybe the deepest truth in all of this is very simple. What they feel is real. What they fear is real. And what they struggle to express may actually be the most important part of their entire emotional story. So do not ignore the silence. Do not brush aside the contradiction. Do not overlook what the heart is trying to communicate in its own quiet language. Sometimes when a person cannot clearly say they need you, they show it through repeated, unfinished returns. Sometimes when they cannot openly say you matter, they reveal it through hesitation and delay. Sometimes when they cannot admit they are afraid, they step back the moment things start to feel real. And sometimes when they cannot say they are not over you, they end up spending a long time proving it in the only way they know how. Stay with this, because this is where the pattern becomes clear. The heart leaves traces, the mind leaves clues, and the deeper emotional self always finds some way to communicate, even without words. Your role is not to force truth out of someone who is not ready to speak it. Your role is to recognize truth when it shows up indirectly. It often appears disguised as silence. It appears as distance that does not feel final. It appears as longing that is never fully explained. It appears as uncertainty, hesitation, and repeated contradiction. These are not random behaviors. They are emotional signals. Keep listening carefully, because this is where understanding shifts. That is the message underneath everything. That is the pattern repeating itself. That is what may be trying to reach you through all the confusion. And once you begin to truly understand this, you will never look at emotional silence the same way again.